Hey guys, this is gonna be a long one. Like a lot of us, I've been playing and enjoying games for most of my life. I do feel that as you get older, it gets easier and easier to devalue this beautiful hobby. It gets easier to deprioritize it from your everyday life. Life, indeed, starts to get in the way. There are bills to pay, activities to attend. You, unfortunately, in a way, start to grow up. And since now you can't dedicate 10 hours a day to play games,
vamos a meterle 10 horitas ahora tranquilitamente, que esto es nada.
Some of those delectable RPGs and longer stories become way harder to digest. Sometimes it's easier to fall into the pit of sinking an hour or two in the current toxic multiplayer shooter and call it a day. A couple of years ago, I found myself falling into this rut, and I absolutely hated it. Can you imagine playing Destiny 2 for a year and gaslighting yourself into enjoying it? Now, I definitely have nothing against people that enjoy these kinds of games. I think people that enjoy single-player stories or indie games might be the odd ones out, actually. But in my case, multipliers, scores, and kill-death ratios weren't necessarily the reason I fell in love with gaming. I think it had a lot more to do with the enamorment of the escapism they gave me. Games when I was younger greatly moved me and stimulated my imagination like nothing else. I was in love with the idea of the underdog, the idea of the great hero. I was absorbing bits and pieces of historical archetypes and ideas I had no idea about. Without even knowing, I was already getting the Cliff Notes version of the Iliad and the Odyssey without even having to read them. There's definitely a case that can be made that some games contain at least some pieces of these stories, you know? The stories that we as humans have carried over through millennia, somehow bottled up and packaged in a neat little N64 cartridge with a golden aura with the words Majora's Mask written all over it. I always felt like games were books you actually took part in. You know, books that could actually hold my attention longer than real actual books. I love the Ocarina of Times, the Donkey Kong 64s, and the Super Mario 64s of my childhood. And I felt I thought about games a lot more. Not only when I was playing them, but when I was going about my life. At school, on my way to school, at dinner, at family gatherings. I thought about alternate storylines and dialogues that never happened in the games. If I had been much smarter or stayed in school, I'd probably be making some sort of ROM hacks or mods or some of those Skyrim train dragon replacements.
What in oblivion is that?
Sentries! What do you see?
It's in the clouds!
But yeah, sometime after I was in the multiplayer game rut, I decided I wanted to bring back happiness and joy into all my gaming moments. I didn't want to be a zombie about it. I wanted to interface as mindfully as possible with gaming as I could. I started to prioritize it a bit more and figured I'd start to write about games I played. They didn't need to be reviews necessarily. It could be any thoughts I had about the games I played. I felt like I owed it to my younger self in a way. All these opinions I had as a kid about the stories I had experienced needed some sort of outlet. This, however, made me face a huge problem I've had all my life. Not only had I the need to write about the games I had been playing, but I also had a huge backlog of games that lived in my mind, and sporadic temporary lists I made in Steam. Here is where Daryl and the website Backlog.com come in.
I never thought we would be looking to Target's checkout line for game design inspiration, but here we are.
Many moons ago, I was watching a video from one of my favorite YouTube channels, Daryl Talks Games. It was called A Misguided Guide to Finishing Your Gaming Backlog, and it hit me like a ton of bricks. There were a couple of videos in this series about finishing your gaming backlog, but I think this was the video that made me realize that I had to organize everything. I couldn't just write about the games I played recently. I couldn't just make a small list about the games I wanted to play. I needed to follow Daryl's advice and catalog the games I wanted to play and make a plan to experience them. He found out that even writing about them gave more meaning to the whole thing. Here's where I got inspired to start writing in general about this, and it's in great part thanks to these kinds of videos that I even started this YouTube channel, but I won't get ahead of myself. I downloaded his Excel template and started to write down the games I had resting in my Steam library. The list started out in a bare bones kind of way. There weren't a lot of columns I wanted to include. I wanted to start with the basics. What game I want to play, how long to beat, excitement before playing, my rating, and my thoughts about the game. My dopamine receptors were waking up and frolicking in all their beautiful dopamine juice. Felt like all these thoughts about missing out on games had instantly disappeared. They had transferred into the Excel sheet where I could see them and destroy them. The only issue was that the space to write wasn't the best. I needed a community. Looking through the annals of the internet, I found a couple of websites where people gathered to write down their thoughts of games, but none looked as polished and organized as Backlogged. Not sponsored at all, by the way. I found their display of this to be very similar to the one Letterboxd uses for their movie reviews. Once I started logging all the games I wanted to play, I still had an itch I wanted to scratch. It wasn't enough to just write those games down, I had to catalog everything. Backlog has this section where you can mark games you've played before as well, and coupled with the ability to make folders, it made a paradise for gamers with OCD-ish tendencies. The site even has like achievements, and it gives you these cute little tiny badges on your profile when you earn them. It's pretty cool. I went down through memory lane and started to remember all the games I played as a kid and as a teen. It was a beautiful moment. I had mirrored these updates in my Excel sheet, and after a bit I had crafted an Excel sheet that the Excel gods would be proud of.
Here we go, level 3 complete. Peter Charles out in front with 440 points.
Now that I had the space to write about games, I spent a whole year playing and writing about games that I loved. It was immensely cathartic and honestly a way more healthy way of interfacing with gaming. Any game now had its own important spot in Backlogged and in my Excel sheet. I suddenly didn't feel terrible for leaving a game behind if I wasn't enjoying it. I could justify the whys and hows in my backlogged writings. The community on the site is so friendly and passionate that I would regularly start getting comments about the stuff I'd write about. I was having a blast. So here we are in 2025, and I'm making a video about the games I played in 2024. Just having the idea of making this video makes me kind of chuckle, you know? And I know it's always kind of silly to make videos about this, but, you know, it's just straight up fun sometimes. I've learned to cherish this hobby way more and feel okay with investing my time in it. And well, having started my journey into my 30s this year, I feel that taking part in your hobbies intentionally and passionately is just a healthier way to go about things. Whether that is restoring old cars, having a Nirvana cover band, bird watching, or playing video games. Which is another reason why I wanted to make this video. So anyway, without further ado and my heartfelt thanks for making it this far in the video, I present to you the games I played in 2024. Which is not to say games that came out in 2024, it's just the games I played last year. I also want to make the clarification that the ratings of these games are very biased and very not objective. And also this video is going to be pretty long, so I'm just going to split it into 3 sections. Part 1 is probably just going to be a couple of months, so enjoy the video.
Hey there, bounty hunter. It's me, Pseudo again. I'm still here. I've been here the whole time. Welcome to detective mode. I'm here to help you sleuth out all those really big, crazy mysteries.
Suddenly? With the fucking detective mode? Why haven't we had access to this the whole time?
All right, let's see. It looks like you're looking for a Dr. John Giblets. Is that correct?
High on Life is a silly game, and it's a stupid game, but it's also a very fun game. Something that can sometimes be forgotten in an era of everything open world and everything RPG. It's a breath of fresh air to play an old school style FPS adventure. I know this might be a hot take, but I think the humor in this game is really top notch. Well, I've seen it's kind of hit or miss. It's very absurd and it's very silly, and you can immediately tell it's written by Justin Roiland. Most of the game, aside from the normal killing stuff gameplay, is just witnessing silly moments around the world. The voice acting made me laugh a lot, and how the lines are delivered is something that I really appreciate. There's also a bunch of Easter eggs. One of them is having you find a theater where you can sit with other characters and watch a complete movie with them while they comment over what's happening. It's actually insane to be able to pull something off like that. This game does go on for far too long though, in my opinion, and it wasn't very challenging. I give it a 3.5 Rick and Morty's out of 5.
Yeah, that sounds good. Everything they just said sounded really good and smart. I love you all so much. You're the first real family I've ever had. Except for my little kids I spawn to shoot at bad guys. And the family I probably had before the G3 fucked with my brain and ruined all my memories.
Probably no surprise to anyone that I absolutely adore Gran Turismo. I've recently started playing all of the older entries, and since my first one was Gran Turismo 4, I even made a video about its tracks and everything. Unfortunately, this entry, Gran Turismo 7, I call the $570 Gran Turismo. Because yeah, now that Sony has started to port so many Sony exclusives to PC, this game is one of the few reasons to buy the console in my case. It's hard not to be content with such a long-standing series like this one, especially since the game looks and feels pristine. Easily one of the most beautiful games I've seen. I think that my main gripe is that I hardly play any multiplayer games, and for some reason Polyphony Digital has cursed this game with toxic dependence of multiplayer. There was absolutely no love placed on the single player career. and it was also plagued with microtransactions, and that makes me feel really sad. I know that recent updates have made raise rewards better and added more content to the pseudo career mode that's available in game, but honestly it just feels too little too late for me. I ended up selling this PS5 after playing this game for a bit. I'd give it 3 wheel spins out of 5.
Oh my god, bro. Oh, hell no, man. What the fuck, man? Look at his shit-eating grin. He knows there's nothing you can do to him. He's bullying you, and you are helpless. Kill him. Kill him now. He won't see death coming. Nip it in the bud before it gets completely out of hand. Right on his cheek. Just a light tap to scare him a little. Don't kill him. Scare him. How did this happen? You can still get out of this. Appeal to his reason.
Disco Elysium, oh boy. Just thinking about this game makes me feel overwhelmed. And I know that no words are enough to actually describe the experience of playing it, but I definitely haven't read enough philosophic literature to actually describe it. As a matter of fact, I'm pretty sure if I try to describe it, it'll sound very boring to some of you. I'd say something like, this game is like a huge 1,000-page philosophy book or a tabletop RPG. And it sounds ridiculous, but I think that's the most accurate synopsis of it. I mean, it's definitely a smarty pants kind of game, but I think it's funny and approachable enough for most people to at least give it a go. It's got a really unique watercolor-like art style, and it contains one of the most breathtakingly written stories of a beat cop that lost his memory and has to solve a murder in the very picturesque and politically charged city of Martinez. Everything feels like a reference of something else in real life, and it is a huge game that definitely deserves at least 100 hours of your time. It also has a branching storyline depending on what dialogue choices you make, and it's honestly impressive the amount of accountability that is placed on characters' choices. Definitely one of my top favorite games of all time. In my review, I gave it 5 critical race theory books out of 5.
Did she just imply that you're fat? You're not fat. The body type she's referring to is called a Franco-Nigerian hard body.
If there's one thing you gotta know about me, is that I have a fixation on fishing minigames on video games. There's something about the cataloging of fish and the pristine progression of these games that gives my brain so much comfortability that I can't even begin to describe. I also have a soft spot for restaurant sims, so a game that combines 2 of my favorite things was an incredibly pleasant surprise for me. As you progress through the game, a lot more mechanics come into play: boat chases, rhythm minigames, stealth sections. It's very surprising, honestly, and I really appreciate when games show absurdity like this. It's kind of a story to the game, but it's not really the game's strong point. It's more like an adhesive glue that holds everything together. Sometimes the game is guilty of spreading itself too thin, but all in all, it's a very wholesome and chill experience. And I'll be very, very biased in giving this game a 5 upgradable fishing hooks out of 5. Outer Worlds is definitely a very special game. I feel that games that deal with extremely grand ideas are very difficult to pull off, and I'm still not really sure if this one does that, at least in the way I'd expect it to do. I know this game is loved or even revered by most people. I've heard it be called the best game of all time, and I can definitely see where people are coming from. Outer Worlds is a game about information, which is a double-edged sword at times. The gathering of it is mostly by text, and for me it can really get tiresome to experience all the lore by writing. If I had to classify it in a way, I think it would somewhat be compatible with the found footage kind of trope. I'm trying not to spoil anything because the gist of the game lies in finding out what it's truly about as you progress through it. You kind of just have to have patience in a sense. One of the things I did immediately love about the game is the immense sense of discovery that's planted in your mind when you begin. The moment you get access to your spaceship, exploring is always a net positive experience. The solar system is scaled down to a point where you could conceivably explore most, if not all, the planets on one of its 22-minute cycles. You know, cycles as in the whole gameplay loop is a very Majora's Mask end-of-the-world cycle where the universe ends every 22 minutes. And after the cycle ends, you get brought back to where you started in order to find out the mysteries and the hows and the whys of everything. Once the game gets going, it has a moment where it piques your curiosity. Call me a grouch, but I think I wasn't that captivated by the concept of it all to call it the best game of all time. I don't think it's even close, actually. It does have a really nice soundtrack, though. I gave it 4 Eyes of the Universe out of 5. February was a month that kept on giving last year. I really liked all the games that I played then, and A Short Hike was no exception. Even if it was the shortest one on the list, and I think it's the shortest game I've played all year, it was a true banger for me. And of course, it has a form of fishing, but that's not the only reason I loved it. It's a game with a simple enough plot, but with a ton of charm and engaging enough gameplay for you to complete it in a single session. The reason this game hits so hard is because behind its chill and apparently happy-go-lucky demeanor lies a still very chill but very meaningful short story about a bird in Bird's Summer, tasked with reaching the top of a mountain in order to get cell phone reception. The game is filled with witty and surprisingly philosophical dialogues, and honestly, it was just a joy to witness. 5 golden feathers out of 5. At first, Eastward feels like playing one of the older Legend of Zelda titles. Controls feel tight and intentional, and the art direction is breathtaking at times. I think this is one of the games that has left me most dazzled by its beauty all year. The opening cinematic when you first boot the game makes me feel like I am in a low-poly Wes Anderson film, and the game has a really light-hearted and whimsy feel as well. It's a game that made me feel many things. And it has a cooking mechanic and a full old-school RPG minigame built into the arcade machines you can find in the game, complete with a collectathon of monsters from the RPG minigame. The whole thing can get really meta really fast. All of its artistic choices, the color palette, the animations are gorgeous. It makes me lose myself in a sea of nostalgia. It's a game that I love to love. It's also really crushing for me to find flaws in some of its parts. I found the story crushingly slow and unnecessarily convoluted. The pacing is weird and it gets in the way of itself a lot of the times. The stealth section was painful to go through. 3.5 shades of white hair out of 5. Not really sure how or why this game got into the games I played in 2024. It's definitely not a type of game that I would enjoy. Felt like the game was always testing me and judging me and calling me stupid for not being able to solve all of its puzzles in time. After I understood that the game is more of a physics sandbox and that the general consensus is that people feel that you need a PhD in engineering to beat it, made me feel a bit better about it. Pretty visuals. 3.5 beheaded knights out of 5. Oh man, am I gonna ruffle some feathers with this one. I was very excited to try this game out since I had really enjoyed Nier Automata, but the games are actually really very different for me. From what I have seen online, people seem to praise the story of this game while ignoring or downplaying its glaring flaws. I'm all for giving a game a chance to tell me a great story even when its other aspects aren't that great, but I couldn't find all that much to like about this game. I found that the bulk of the game was just running and button mashing through mostly empty fields, grinding tons of generic and meaningless side quests, and trying to stomach cringy dialogue. Most of the characters you interact with in the world felt awfully flat, and the main plot of trying to find a cure for your bedridden sister didn't vibe too much with me. Music was kinda nice though. Not as good as Automata though. 2 bedridden sisters out of 5. I really do love difficult gameplay focused games. I think they make up for the majority of my Steam library, and for good reason. The feeling you get for beating difficult sections is insane. It's crazy. I love it. Hotline Miami is honestly just a difficult sections game, but the gameplay is so smooth and fast paced that it makes you feel like you can get good at it. It makes you feel that if you just try one more time, you'll be able to beat the stage. I'm always going to be a sucker for pixel art games, and this game is really pixel arty, so looking at it is always a joy for me. There's also a really trance-like state you go into when you're retrying stages, trying to make the perfect move, listening to the banger 80s soundtrack, killing the last enemy in the room and suddenly having the music stop, and then realizing the game manually makes you backtrack through the level and making you see all the bloodshed you've left behind. It's a trippy experience and very fourth wall breaking in a way. The story is definitely insane and tries to involve the player as if we were actually experiencing the game in real life. Well, you know, not literally, but figuratively in a way. It's one of those meta things where the game even scolds you at some point for doing too much killing. Terrifyingly great experience. In short, 4.5 billion hours of EDM out of 5. I almost immediately jumped into Hotline Miami's sequel, and I was immediately greeted with a way grittier and way edgier game. This game is definitely more of the same with minor tweaks here and there. What I found more interesting this time around was that the game was told mostly through flashbacks from a war, and it explores a lot of violent themes, and it doubles down on the whole meta aspect of the previous game. The game tries to challenge what you think you know about games and media by kind of forcing you to do violent and awful things in the game. Violent and awful things in the name of, you know, this being a video game. This way you can explore many dark and real themes. The storytelling is frankly next level, and through the use of many characters, counterintuitively so, it gives a very effective anti-violence and anti-war message. The ending was a complete acid trip. 4.5 nuclear bombs out of 5. I had seen Dragon's Dogma release many years ago, and some people were praising it for having some unique aspects in the somewhat stale RPG world at that moment. I remember not being too interested in it since it had mediocre reviews. I had seen though that Dragon's Dogma 2 was being released and was being seriously hyped, so I thought I'd do the responsible thing and play the first one before the second one got released. This game is brutal in many ways. It offers very little handhold and it has a very rough and unnecessarily convoluted story. Its presentation is kind of weird too, and it can feel pretty clunky. It doesn't give the best first impression, honestly. The game, however, does shine at points, and when it shines very brightly. Mostly through gameplay and great open world exploration. The fighting feels so good and the character animations are really fluid, so every action you take has a really good feedback. Most boss battles are really fun too, especially since you can climb them and jam your sword in their eyes, very a la Shadow of the Colossus. But also with some Dark Souls, but also with some Monster Hunter sprinkled on top. It's a very satisfying mix of stuff, and it makes for a very fun experience, despite the game not having a traditional fast travel system, which honestly made exploration grating at times. The overall experience of exploration is very rewarding though. The open world is huge and it's very fun to encounter tough enemies, both human and not so human. One of the things people love to point out about this game is the pawn system, which is kind of a choose your own party kind of deal. You're like a chosen dragon dude that can control these pawns that fight for you and make up your party or whatever. I didn't care too much for it, but the system worked well enough. In short, 4.5 chosen ones out of 5.
possess power fit to best me, or your world is forfeit into April.
I literally only played this game in April, and I think it was my favorite game I played all year, for a couple of important reasons. I feel like it's beautiful when the industry makes a game that has new ideas and tries to break the paradigms of traditional games, even if it's in small ways. I'm not going to say the game is perfect, even though I'll definitely give it a 5 out of 5 masterpiece status in my books, because in reality, it's still a flawed game that suffers from poor optimization. A curse and trend that unfortunately doesn't seem to be losing momentum in this day and age. One of the things I appreciate the most about games, and something this game nails 100%, is that it has top-tier exploration mechanics. It greatly respects the player's time and makes exploration always a gratifying experience. This was actually what I liked the most. I say this as someone who really enjoys not following the main objective, and immensely enjoys seeing what's behind the bushes and behind the mountain. I like that the game caters to completionists, who enjoy finding collectibles and getting lost in the world, because everything looks so beautiful. A big win for your average Breath of the Wild player, to be honest. This game actually has its own version of Koroks, which are called Seeker tokens. The difference here is that you can exchange them for equipment instead of just having Nintendo give you a huge middle finger when you get them all. It's a collectathon done right. I know most people dread this, but to me it gives exploration another layer of meaning. Especially, and I know that I've harped on this, the game is just such a looker. Aside from exploration, the game is a complete joy to experience. The combat mechanics are super tight and are quite deep. Think Elden Ring plus The Witcher, but everyone has special moves and customization like Baldur's Gate 3. It's something that must be experienced at least once in an RPG player's life. The game is also kinda weird in that it doesn't do much hand-holding, and I really love this trend in games, to be honest. It's like watching a movie that has no exposition and tells you the information you need to understand and everything in different ways. Fast travel is rudimentary, the bosses hit very hard, and you start the game being just a helpless scrub. It's the perfect rags to riches story. Sometimes quests don't mark where you need to go, and your supplies spoil if you keep them in your inventory for far too long. It definitely feels like it's more of a remake of the first game because the story is exactly the same, which is not all bad in reality. But yeah, TLDR, it's more of the same, but gooder and better, with modern tweaks to most mechanics. 5 God's Bane swords in my heart out of 5. And yes, my dearest friends, we arrive at May 2024. I actually only played Final Fantasy games this month, and I do want to make a separate video for that series, so I think this might be the best moment for a break. We've got 13 games reviewed so far and 28 to go. I I hope you do stay for the rest of the journey with me. And well, you guys get the point. I love talking about video games and my impressions of them. And the whole process of creating this video really inspires me to keep working on my backlog. I do realize though, echoing the words of many before me, that defeating a backlog might not be possible. It's probably not even a good move to view it as something to be defeated or completed. It's more of a thing where you enjoy the journey and not the destination. It's there to be enjoyed and to inspire you to make a 3-part video about all the games you played last year. So yeah, see you in part 2.